A father's poison turns his daughter's mind to mush, her screams silenced in a cellar where elite men feast on the flesh of the forgotten. Until one enslaved man's rage ignites a fire that devours 13 untouchable souls in 1841 South Carolina. What buried ledger of blood rituals could one mad woman and a vengeful slave unearth from a plantation's hidden depths, toppling an empire of southern horrors? Could revenge taste sweeter than the cannibal feasts it destroys? Or does justice demand becoming the monster you slay? In April 1841, Silas Rutledge made an announcement that shocked even the cruelest plantation owners in South Carolina. He was placing his daughter, Catherine, a 28-year-old woman weighing over 260 pounds, under the complete authority of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross. Not as a nurse, not as a companion, as her owner in every way that mattered except on paper. The white society of Colleton County was scandalized, but they had no idea what Rutledge was truly doing or what Ezekiel Cross would do to Catherine over the following months. By November, Catherine's body had changed in ways no one could explain. 13 men were dead, and Cypress Grove Plantation was nothing but ash. What really happened between that enslaved man and the plantation owner's daughter? What did he do to her that terrified everyone who witnessed it? Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Spring in Colleton County arrived with oppressive heat and humidity that made the air feel solid. The Combee River moved slowly through the low country, its dark water reflecting Spanish moss that hung from live oak trees like funeral shrouds. Rice paddies stretched for miles, their flooded fields worked by hundreds of enslaved people who moved through water up to their knees from dawn until dusk. This was wealth built on suffering, prosperity extracted from human misery, all of it justified by men who convinced themselves that cruelty was simply the natural order of things. Cypress Grove Plantation sat on 800 acres of moderately productive land. Its owner, Silas Rutledge, was not quite part of the county's elite, but desperately wanted to be. He owned 58 enslaved people, which made him wealthy by most standards, but barely qualified him as mid-tier in local society. The truly powerful families owned thousands of acres and hundreds of slaves. They summered in Charleston and sent their children to universities in the North. Their names carried weight that could open doors or destroy reputations with a single word. Silas had married Elizabeth Yancey in 1812, a union that brought moderate land holdings and a respected surname. Elizabeth had been a practical woman who kept meticulous records and seemed more interested in profit margins than social climbing. She had died giving birth in 1813 to a daughter christened Catherine. For 28 years, Silas raised Catherine alone while focusing his energies on gaining entry to the inner circles of county power. He was a tall man, thin in the way of people who forget to eat when consumed by obsession. His hair had gone gray prematurely, giving him a severe appearance that matched his cold temperament. In business, he was known for being shrewd but honorable enough, the kind of man who would drive hard bargains but keep his word. His daughter Catherine had grown up isolated, educated by tutors, never quite belonging anywhere. By 1841, she was 28 years old and weighed nearly 260 pounds. Her body was swollen from years of medications prescribed by doctors who diagnosed her with hysteria and female nervous disorders. She suffered violent fits where she would scream and throw objects. She had attacked her father with a letter opener the previous year, leaving a scar across his left hand. The white society of Colleton County whispered about her with false sympathy. Poor Silas Rutledge, burdened with a mad daughter, what a shame. She had been such a pretty child. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew what Catherine had witnessed when she was 12 years old, or that her madness was not madness at all, but a rational response to living with monsters. The letter arrived on April 7th, delivered by private courier. Silas opened it in his study, expecting business correspondence. Instead, he found 3 pages on expensive paper sealed with red wax bearing a symbol he recognized immediately: a scythe crossed with wheat stalks, the mark of the Brethren of the Harvest. The Brethren, 13 men who gathered in darkness to perform rituals they believed strengthened the land through blood sacrifice. They mixed old European traditions with beliefs borrowed from enslaved people who understood spirits and power. They believed the strong were meant to consume the weak, literally when necessary. Silas had been initiated in 1822. He had attended perhaps 40 gatherings over 19 years, participating in rituals that ranged from disturbing to monstrous. The letter informed him he was in debt, $12,000 borrowed over years of gambling losses and failed investments. An impossible sum. Repayment would require selling most of his land and all his slaves, destroying everything he had built. But the letter offered an alternative, and demonstration of commitment from members in difficult positions. Silas would take his daughter Catherine and place her under the complete authority of one of his enslaved men, not temporarily, not as punishment, as a genuine transfer of responsibility lasting 1 full year. The enslaved man would have total control over her person, her daily activities, her treatment. Silas would announce this publicly at a gathering of the county's prominent families, explaining it as an extreme medical measure for his daughter's condition. The humiliation would be absolute. In a society where supposedly white women were precious and protected above all others, Silas would be declaring his daughter worth less than his property. But if he agreed, his debt would be forgiven, and the Brethren would provide financial support to restore his position. Silas sat in his study for hours that night. He thought about his options. Bankruptcy would destroy him completely. The Brethren had connections to every judge, every lawyer, every politician in the region. They could make him disappear if he became a problem. Or he could sacrifice his daughter's dignity to maintain his own position. The choice society had trained him to make: property over people, power over morality. He wrote his acceptance by candlelight and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter arrived with a name and brief history. Ezekiel Cross, age 33. Purchased recently through an intermediary from a Virginia plantation. Skills included carpentry and herbal medicine. Temperament listed as quiet and obedient. What the letter did not say was that Ezekiel Cross had been selected specifically for this purpose, that his placement at Cypress Grove was no accident, that he carried his own burning need for justice and the patience to wait for exactly the right moment. Ezekiel arrived on April 13th in a wagon driven by a slave trader named Henderson. The wagon pulled directly to the main house, unusual since most slave transactions happen near the barns. Silas came out onto the porch, shading his eyes against the morning sun. In the wagon bed sat Ezekiel. The first thing Silas noticed was his eyes. Most enslaved people kept their gaze down as a survival mechanism, but Ezekiel looked directly at Silas, his expression calm and assessing. It made him deeply uncomfortable. Ezekiel was tall, perhaps 6'2", with broad shoulders and lean muscle from a lifetime of hard labor. His skin was unmarked by whipping scars. His clothes were simple but clean. His hands were large and calloused, but his fingers had a precision that suggested skilled work rather than just brute force. Henderson climbed down and handed papers to Silas. Ezekiel Cross as requested. Previous owner said he was quiet but capable. Your associates want you to know this one was carefully selected. Silas barely glanced at the papers. He addressed Ezekiel directly. You understand why you are here? Yes, sir. Ezekiel's voice was deep and measured with a slight Virginia accent. My daughter is unwell. You will be responsible for her care. Doctors have failed. You claim knowledge of herbal treatments. My grandmother was a healer, sir. She taught me before I was sold. The transaction completed quickly. Ezekiel was shown to a small cabin near the main house, separate from other slave quarters. He was given basic supplies and told his duties would begin the next day. He was informed that his sole responsibility was Catherine's care and that failure would have severe consequences. Ezekiel nodded and said yes, sir, when required. Then he was left alone. For the first time since arriving, he allowed his expression to change. His jaw unclenched slightly, his shoulders relaxed. He sat on the bed and pulled from inside his shirt a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a piece of worn paper with 3 names written in a child's uncertain handwriting. Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth. His wife, his son, his daughter. Sold away from him 3 years ago to a plantation in Alabama known for working slaves to death. He had learned they all died within 18 months. Sarah from untreated fever. Benjamin from an injury that turned septic. Ruth from simply giving up, a 6-year-old child who stopped eating because she could not understand why her family had been torn apart.